This one is inside Europe's 1 billion, I think, abandoned mega build by the B1M, which I've watched some video from this channel before about like construction projects. It's pretty interesting. Okay. Is this like a mall?
Whoa. The size of this place. So this huge building cost more than $1 billion to build.
Damn.
It was designed for thousands of people, but right now it's completely empty.
Why?
This video is a bit different for us, but today I'm taking you guys inside one of the biggest abandoned buildings in all of Europe.
It's maybe not a mall, I don't know.
In 1979, a spaceship landed in West Berlin. It was the height of the Cold War, and Germany was cut in half. Just over here, the Soviets were building the Palace of the Republic, an enormous structure that would host the Parliament of East Germany. The West, meanwhile, was determined it could do anything the East could, but bigger and better. So West Berlin put forward the spaceship. It was to cost £1 billion to construct, making it the most expensive new building in the city since World War II. At its opening, then Federal President Walter Scheel declared it would outlast even the Great Pyramids of Giza.
Berliners gave that building a nickname. They called it the
That's such an
spaceship.
insane thing to say. I mean, like, I know you want to hype up your building, but that's such an insane thing to say.
Even though it was partly built out of spite, this building has become something of an icon for Berlin. It's both embraced and despised, depending who you ask.
In many ways, the construction of this place mirrors the story of Berlin itself. It's dark, it's techno, it's packed full of history, and steeped in the politics of the Cold War.
But in recent years, the ICC has come under threat and been left abandoned. Now, a new competition could be set to reinvent this spaceship for a Berlin that looks radically different.
Alright, tell me the full story though.
There's just something about Berlin, particularly when it comes to architecture. It can be brash and cold, brutalist and modern, a real mix of architectural styles and time periods. That's perhaps best represented by the International Conference Centre, or ICC, a building that's been dubbed by the locals here as the Spaceship. But there's a lot more to this place than meets the eye. Inside is one of the biggest convention centres in the world, a place that housed what was the second largest stage in all of Europe.
And it holds a pretty remarkable engineering secret. You see, this isn't just one massive building. What you're looking at right now is the shell, and there's something incredible suspended inside. But to tell you the full story, we first have to go back in time. In the 1960s, Berlin was very much a city divided, both physically and ideologically. In 1961, the Berlin Wall was constructed to stop East Germans from fleeing to the West. It became one of the most potent symbols of the division in the country, separating families, friends, and communities.
It's still insane that there was a
The East was communist-controlled, while the West was a democratic enclave supported by the British, Americans, and other Western powers. This was the Cold War, and it was competitive. If one side did something, so too did the other, whether that be stockpiling nuclear weapons or heading to the moon. Even something as small as city infrastructure became a way for both sides to try and show their superiority. The two cities began to have radically different architectural styles to reflect their opposing ideologies. East Berlin prioritized grand statement pieces that showcased the government's unopposed strength, like the Karl Marx Alley or the futuristic TV tower they planted at Alexanderplatz. It's a 638-meter watchtower that broadcast propaganda and could be seen from pretty much everywhere in both cities.
That's very specific.
For its part, the West retaliated with modernist architecture that symbolized progress, democratization, and technological achievements, such as the Berlin Philharmonie and the Tegel Airport Terminal. It was during this time that the East announced they would be replacing the now demolished Berlin Palace that once housed Prussian kings and German emperors with their own Palace of the Republic. Inside would be the Volkskammer, the Parliament of East Germany.
Okay.
This building was one of the most significant architectural projects of the German Democratic Republic. It featured luxurious materials that weren't common in the Soviet Union, including marble and wood paneling, making it one of the most extravagant structures in the entire country. Naturally, of course,
It's really kind of shameful, this whole thing of like, I mean, just trying to have a building prestige context, like, you know, it's only like 20 years after World War II. It's maybe better to spend money on like rebuilding a country, even though you only have like one side of Berlin, for example, than making like crazy ass building just to compete with the other side who's making crazy ass building. I don't know. It's a bit embarrassing.
the West had to respond. They put forward their own enormous, extravagant building. Only, instead of a palace, their building would be the largest Congress Center in the world. Instead of housing a communist regime, theirs would hold international conferences and trade fairs. It would be a capitalist playground. This place would have another purpose too. To announce West Berlin as a hub for international business and culture, to declare that it could be its own city, not just an enclave in an increasingly unfriendly part of the world.
The political idea of this building was to set up a building which was the biggest, the largest convention center in Europe, which was, of course, a political statement at that time.
I guess that makes sense, yeah.
To have it in West Berlin, a city surrounded by communists and by Russian army.
Husband and wife architects Ralph Schuler and Ursulina Schuler-Witz were chosen to design the behemoth, and they conceived a
I don't, you know, as far as like design questions and design like taste, I don't dislike how it looks. It definitely has a little bit of like that spaceship vibe that people are calling it. I can see it a little bit. And sure, it's not very colorful or anything, but I don't hate it. It does give you megalophobia. Sure, it's massive, but I don't hate the look of it.
futuristic high-tech structure unlike anything that had been seen before. They wanted to create a building that symbolized the modernity and technological advancement of the Berlin they wanted to live in. What they created was a striking mix of brutalism and high-tech architecture. You can see this in the exposed steel beams, sharp angles, and its machine-like aesthetic. This was technical optimism, and it represented all the
something cool
hope
about
that West
brutalism.
Berliners had for the future. The space race as a convention center.
That was probably the biggest construction site ever in West Berlin, and every time I drove by car with my parents, there was this huge construction site on the ground.
Construction works first started in 1973, and when it was completed in
73.
1979, more than 900 million Deutschmarks have been spent, making it the most expensive building in West Berlin since the end of World War II. At 320 meters long, 80 meters wide, and 40 meters high, it was one of the largest buildings in the city. You could lie the Eiffel Tower down flat, and it would just
Okay.
about fit inside.
This site's also
Alright, then.
surrounded by pretty busy roads, so getting the soundproofing right was essential.
To ensure that noise and vibrations from the outside couldn't be felt inside, it was decided that the ICC would become a building within a building. This inner building would be enclosed in an independently constructed separate outer shell. Ironically, a kind of Russian
Okay.
doll of a structure. This inner building was made of reinforced concrete with pre-tensioned transverse divider elements as the main supports. The weight
Alright
of the
then.
building was transferred down the divider elements to the foundations. Neoprene bearings were used to ensure technical separation from any exterior sounds or vibrations. Meanwhile, the outer building consisted of exterior walls and the roof, effectively forming a shell around the inner building.
Yeah,
The walls and roof were built
interesting. Reminds me of the sarcophagus, right? From Chernobyl.
as a steel load-bearing structure.
This is one of those buildings
guess
that really
it had
isn't
not happened
afraid
yet.
to show off its structure. It was in fact one of the first in the world to start doing that. A lot of the really big engineering elements, instead of being hidden away, are brought out for the world to see, like those huge steel trusses you can see behind me. They carry the immense weight of what's inside this centre.
This building really does embrace its location at the axis of so many motorways. It even has a car foyer in the form of a drive-in level, which allows cars to arrive immediately below the main entrance.
Okay.
Walking in here
Okay, but right away from like the design they talked about, like I don't know what the guy was smoking, saying that this would last as long as the pyramids or outlast the pyramids, but not that I know much about architecture, but like this system of like the outer shell and basically like the inside of the building being lifted by some other parts of it, like this all sounds very, very like it's definitely gonna erode eventually. So there's no freaking way this lasts as long as the pyramid. I don't know what he was smoking.
Really is like stepping back in time. As soon as you come inside, that
It's not just like a pile
1970s
of
techno-optimism
cut out
really
stone.
hits you. This is the boulevard. This is level 0. This is what most people would experience as soon as they walked into this building. And it's like I've stepped onto the set of Star Wars. It really is out of this world.
Star Wars.
From this boulevard, you can access staircases and escalators which are arranged like side roads, taking you up to the other levels of the building. This turns level 0 into a kind of traffic hub with its own road system for visitors.
When you enter this building, the first association you have, it's something beyond reality. You feel like being in a very crazy movie.
I mean, it's so massive, it would
Now,
feel
one
special.
thing you won't have failed to notice is the crazy lighting system above my head. It was designed by
Like as someone who used to live in the countryside and most stores or buildings were like fairly small, right? When I moved here, like in the top of France, right? Not far from where I live, there's like a massive commercial center, I guess. And even recently I had to go there to like give a package, and it's absolutely insane the scale. And even then, I know it's actually pretty small compared to like an actual bigger city. But I was basically like going inside, and I had to find like where to give my package, and I had no idea because the place was so massive. We're talking about like a couple kilometers or something, right? And so I kept walking around, just back and forth between side, like, and my GPS was like, not giving me any idea. It was like so massive. That was probably like the biggest structure I've been inside of. I mean, it was crazy.
Berlin-based artist Frank Uhring, red on one side, blue on the other. And the idea of that was to try and help people navigate and find their way around this absolute maze of a building.
I was gonna say,
And
is this
that
like,
lighting system all comes together here.
is this communism
above
versus
this central meeting point? This sculpture above me is called the Brain, and I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of unlike anything I've seen before. It is an enormous grey thing. It spans 3 stories up through this building, and it's covered in neon lights. You can see these kind of like strands radiating out from it.
stylish.
They're designed to look like nerve fibers coming out and going out through the building. And the idea of this structure was quite literally to break the ice and get people talking and to bring people together. Things don't get any less sci-fi as you move through the building.
wow.
And there's a reason for that. The room I'm
Okay.
in now
Like, yeah, I definitely see the spaceship vibe, no doubt. This definitely gives the spaceship vibe.
one of the lecture halls, Hall 6, was actually modelled off Star Trek, one of the television shows that
I
were
see.
popular at the time. And you can really see where this building gets its nickname, the spaceship, not just outside, but inside as well. I feel like I'm in a movie right now. It's
That is
very,
cool.
very cool.
That is cool.
So this is probably the most impressive part of the ICC, right? It's called the main hall. It can seat 5,000 people, and is the first conference room of its size ever constructed in Germany. And it can be made even bigger. The floor I'm currently standing on can be lifted up, connecting this hall to another massive hall through there, and creating one of the biggest stages in Europe. But that's not all. These enormous rooms have another incredible secret.
Okay.
They're floating.
They're both suspended from the outer shell using a combination of advanced structural and mechanical design techniques.
Explain
Those
that to me.
massive steel trusses we showed you earlier extend up over the roof of the building, and they're the primary load-bearing components supporting those suspended halls that are sitting inside.
Yeah.
Halls 1 and 2 are directly suspended from these trusses using tension steel hangers or rods. They transfer the weight of the halls to the roof trusses. The trusses themselves are
Makes
supported
sense.
by massive steel columns and foundation points that distribute the weight down to the ground.
A really good way to show you how that works is with this very cool physical model of the ICC building. I love stuff like this. You can see up here these big steel roof trusses I just showed you. They're carrying the weight, the huge weight of those suspended theatres transferring them across down the sides of the building through these steel columns and into the foundations in the ground.
By suspending halls 1 and 2, the architects effectively isolated them from vibrations and noise generated in other parts of the building, particularly the halls and spaces below and the
Which again, like, is a crazy feat of engineering. I wouldn't doubt it, but at the same time, there's no way this is something that has an insanely long life expectancy, right? I mean, it's so specific to have the building like hanging off the ground, I guess.
surrounding motorways. That massively improves acoustics and means that more than one event can take place at the same time and that people can be as loud as they want to be. That suspended system has been designed to accommodate all kinds of loads, including those caused by crowd movement, equipment vibrations, and environmental factors like wind or even earthquakes.
It also
gonna say
frees up
earthquake,
this
yeah.
massive space
Okay.
underneath and creates column-free spaces inside the halls. I have to say, I've had a good look around. I've tried to put this place through its paces, right? And there are literally no bad seats. It's a really clever and sophisticated engineering solution, and part of what makes this building such an architectural landmark.
Okay.
But when it was completed and open to the public, the reaction was pretty mixed. While some praised its forward-thinking and bold design, others noted the enormous construction costs, equivalent to over $1 billion in
is the
today's
B1M.
money. Despite that, the building has developed an almost cult-like status and was given a heritage listing in 2019.
Everyone who comes to Berlin and who passes by say, wow, what is that? And that is incredible. What an iconic architecture. Only from the outside, but if you are inside, that's even more amazing. People came over from everywhere in the world to join the opening ceremonies for this building. So it was a very, very known building, not only in Berlin, but you can say in
Then
Europe.
why
It
is it
was a
abandoned?
very, very famous building.
But over the years, it's struggled to be maintained for its original purpose. It's just too huge.
Okay.
It was effectively closed and abandoned in 2014, and it's been used as accommodation for refugees, a COVID vaccination centre, and as a space for art exhibitions.
Within the last 10 or 20 years, there always was the idea of destroying the building, setting up something new, and there was always a big opposition against it because people love it. It's one of the most important.
Yeah, literally, like, I guess it's so big that most of the time it just doesn't make sense for, like, it's rare probably to have enough people for a convention or anything that would make sense. So most of the time it's not being used and it doesn't make the most sense. I guess they could always maybe repurpose it in some way. I don't know. Like, just this room, it feels like it would be, you know, I don't know. Like, it could be a concert room in some way if you modified it. Yeah, I'm sure there might be some way to
Sides
do
of the
this.
city.
But now the city government really does want to rejuvenate this sleeping beauty. They're launching a competition where investors can apply to use and run the building.
Meeting people from all over the world, investors, architects, courageous people, innovative people that have ideas. It's not a competition where you
Courageous.
just, say that is our concept and take it or don't take it, but it's a dialogue. So the idea is that the investor and the architects, they enter into a dialogue with the city of Berlin to have the most innovative concept for this building.
They'll be able to rent the ICC for free for 99 years and bring it back to life.
Damn.
The only prerequisite is that they have to remodel it and make it available for public use.
I think
public use.
99%
Okay.
of the Berliners love it. And they wish to be it open again because it's a public space also.
There really
Fair
is
enough.
still a lot of love for this abandoned spaceship structure. The recent art exhibition was sold out and had incredible hype from the public. Tickets to see inside the building on an Open Heritage Day were snapped up in just 2 hours. The Berlin of today is a city of innovation. It's Germany's startup capital with 500 new ventures every year. And of course, it's the political centre of the country and a key pillar of the EU.
The city hopes to have made the decision by the end of 2026, at which point this sleeping giant might just have new life breathed into it once again.
This video
I feel
is
like
sponsored by the
it's not going to be anything too surprising. It's probably, again, maybe concerts and stuff like that would make sense. A mall in some way. I don't know.
City of Berlin. You can learn more about that at the link below. Don't forget
sponsored by
that we're
City.
inspiring the next
That's the
generation of
first time I've seen
engineers
that.
through our investment into BrickBorrow, a fantastic LEGO subscription service. You can learn more and get started today over.
It's very interesting though. Very, very interesting. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of building with like this kind of crazy awesome story in not just Europe but in different countries, right? I mean, it did clearly not start with the best kind of intention, right? It was literally like, you know, we want to show a bigger dick than yours, right? So they made this building, and I guess despite, you know, it did have some use, I guess, over the years probably, and maybe they can actually rejuvenate it with whatever decision they end up making on who's gonna run it. But yeah, again, I don't like pure brutalism as far as like, you know, building style, like when it's so barren that it's like, I don't know, it's almost like an old movie kind of thing. But this one is like just the right mix. So visually, I like it. I like it. Yeah. Good video.